Today I'm going to demonstrate how I made an Avatar movie inspired self-portrait. I started out by lightly sketching the basic shape of a face with a pencil, and I did this on a piece of copy paper because I'm not going to actually do my final on this. We're going to do what is called a graphite transfer, and you'll see that in just a second. So once I was happy with the shape of the face, I flipped my paper over, and then where I could see the outline, I was coloring with my graphite pencil roughly along the outline of the face shape that I just did. Because as I said before, we're going to be doing what's called a graphite transfer, where I'm going to flip the paper over once again and then outline the shape of the face on my watercolor paper. And that is going to create the outline that I had previously created, and hence the term graphite transfer. It will transfer the graphite onto my watercolor paper to use as my outline of the avatar's face. I did have to sharpen my pencil a couple of times when I was just doing the rough coloring over on the other side, because I wanted to make sure that it was dark enough and I got enough graphite on the actual side of the paper so that it would transfer. After I had the basic face shape, I did lightly draw some reference lines for a basic face. So you want to do one in the middle. Then I also did one about halfway down or in the center point horizontally. I also did one to reference for the mouth, and one just below the top of the head for the hairline. And then I also made some necklines and just basic shoulder lines going down because this is a portrait. So I did make the face front and center. So now I'm going to start with my hair. So I have long blonde hair, and my part is slightly to my right. So you might even want to go look in the mirror just to see where your hairline starts. I did make that top horizontal line to give me a reference for my hairline, because if you've noticed, I know some people, you might just assume that you would start the hairline at the top of the head, but once it's actually there, it would not look very proportional. I think some of you that I've had a couple years ago when you were in 5th grade, we did self-portraits, and we went over that. So make sure to not start your hairline right on the very top of the head, because then it will look a little off. And that's also why I did the 3 lines in the middle of the face for the eye reference, the hairline, and the mouth, to try to make the proportions of the face as accurate as possible. So I'm not getting super detailed here by doing every single strand of my hair, because that would take me a very long time. So you can see that I am just doing slight lines, which is implied texture in my hair, where a section of it might be facing a different way or slightly curled, just to give it some dimension and again some visual texture. And my kitten Vino decided to come give us an example of actual or real texture with his fur and how he likes to sit on my artwork. I was looking at a picture or like a screenshot from the original Avatar movie when I was creating this as a reference image, which I highly recommend you guys use in general, because it will just make your drawings and artwork more accurate. And that is why I was making the ears like this, because if you are familiar with the Avatar, their ears kind of look like elf ears. And I did go out of my way to kind of make it look like some of the strands of my hair were overlapping the ears, just to give it a little bit more dimension. And then if you look at a photo of an avatar from the movie, hopefully you've noticed that their noses are very wide and slightly flat compared to like an actual human's nose. It also kind of makes me think of a cat's nose as well. So I did kind of make the tip of the nose slightly rounded in or more of a flat triangle, like a cat's nose. So you can also reference a cat's nose. And I used my middle horizontal line as a reference for where the top of the nose started. And then I started on the top lip, and the bottom horizontal reference line that I made, I'm going to put the top lip just above it, and then the bottom lip I am going to make kind of a little smile line right under the horizontal line because humans' lips, the bottom lip is generally slightly bigger than the top lip if it is actually proportional. And then I am moving on to the brow bone, or the part of the bone where your eyebrows might be, but if you carefully look at avatars, they actually do not have eyebrows. They do have coloring where the eyebrows would be, but I don't believe they actually have hair for eyebrows. I did that by adding slightly curved lines connecting to the top of the nose. And also, if you are looking at a reference image, hopefully you notice that the avatar's eyes are really big. They're a lot bigger than like a human's eyes actually are, so I'm doing some nice big wide eyes. And initially I did do some hair strokes for an eyebrow, but like I said, upon closer inspection, they didn't really have hair for their eyebrows, so I ended up erasing that. So then I did look as well, and so their skin is a light blue, and then they have slightly darker blue stripes across their face. Like you can see where the eyebrow would be, but there's no hair. It's just a darker blue outlining where their eyebrows would be. So now I am just outlining those darker blue stripes on the face, trying to keep it as symmetrical as possible, meaning it's the same on either side of the face. But again, these are organic forms from, well, the Na'vi world in the Avatar world, so it's not going to be exactly proportionate or exactly symmetrical, so it's okay if it doesn't come out exactly, but I did try to make it as symmetrical as possible. So I did, I guess, 4 kind of tiger stripes or lines, and then a center one that was kind of curved and all came down, pointing down the nose at the end. You'll see here. And again, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine. You could do the stripes completely different. I was just pretty much doing the same thing as the reference image that I was looking at, but I'm pretty sure in the movie, all the different avatars have different markings or stripes. So again, this is your work. Get creative with it and customize your avatar however you'd like. And I also gave mine a couple of stripes, just kind of highlighting her cheekbones as well, that I'll be filling in with the darker blue also. And then I did add some little round lines indicating where the actual eyeball would be, and where I think the tear ducts of their eyes would be, and I will just end up outlining that in black Sharpie after I am happy with my pencil. And remember, we always start with pencil so that we can erase until we are happy with our final design, because Sharpie is permanent. And then I also put the center, the black iris in the center of the eyes, and I just kind of shaded it in as a reminder to myself to fill that in with black Sharpie. And I did tweak a couple things here and there and made some lines slightly darker, but that's the basic outline of the face, so I was happy with it at that point. And then I started on the background. Again, you can get as creative and detailed or as simple as you'd like, because this is your own personal artwork. But according to the movies, the Na'vi or the Avatar people, they do live in kind of a jungle setting, so I just decided to do some vines of varied thickness in the back, because when I think of jungles, I think of vines or animals like swinging on them and stuff. I think they also do that in a movie as well, but I'm sure some of you guys will see later tonight, because today, December 16th, 2022, the second movie is being released, woo! And I added some very basic leaves on some of the vines, again, to give it some variation, or I guess variety, which is a principle of design, and to also help with unity, to make it look like a unified piece. Those are just kind of the go-to shape whenever I think of a simple leaf. Again, you could do whatever you'd like. Maybe you could add like some little lizards or something on the vines. That would be an interesting idea as well. But in demonstration purposes, I did try to keep it simple. And I did alternate where my leaves were on the vines and the directions that they were in. They kind of make me think of teardrop shapes, or little fish, if you want to think about it that way. So once I was happy with my vines and leaves, I felt that I was ready to start with my Sharpie. And I did not end up going over every single line that I left with my pencil over with my Sharpie, because I decided to simplify it a little bit more, and I ended up erasing some of those. Also, for the darker blue stripes on the face, I did not outline those in Sharpie because I wanted to create some value with a lighter blue paint and then go over it with a dark blue paint, which you'll see later. But again, that is just personal preference. You're more than welcome to outline it with black. It would certainly make it a lot easier for coloring purposes, but I decided to try to freehand it. I actually did add a few more implied texture lines to like the ears as well as my hair. You can see the tops of the ears where I did just do that line, that is actually going to be blue, because the inside of the ears, again, if you're looking at a reference image, they're more of a pink color, and I'll show you that when we color it. So again, just carefully outlining the shapes that I want. I filled in the tear ducts with a little bit more of the black to make the eyes look nice and round. And I did fill in the iris, or the black pupil of the eye, with the black Sharpie, just because I like that nice crisp black color that Sharpie offers, and it doesn't smudge when you go over it with watercolor paint. You could fill that in with paint though, that's completely optional. I just prefer filling in the larger spaces with the pure black because it is quicker and easier for me. So again, personal preference. I realized after the fact that I totally forgot to add a little white dot in each of the eyes to be like the highlight. If you look at like a lot of cartoons, they usually have that. So I will probably go back with my acrylic paint pen that I have and just go add that white dot. So if you don't have an acrylic paint pen, or if you don't have pure white paint, just try to keep that in mind if you do want to add a highlight to the eye. I mean, I think it still looks cool without it, but it would just add a little bit more depth to it. You could also just take some opaque white paint and use a paintbrush. I actually decided to turn one of the vines into a tree branch that was kind of cropped to create some visual interest and also just add some more variety. I end up coloring that in brown, and I did add a different or another vine. I also just to add a few little negative texture lines here and there on the vines, again to give it that slightly textured feel, because vines are not necessarily perfectly smooth. Then last but not least, I erased any pencil marks that were not covered in Sharpie or that I didn't end up going over and using. Before erasing the outlines of the stripes on the face though, I actually did take a photo with my phone of the outline and everything, just to use again as a reference, since I didn't choose to outline it in black, so that I would know exactly where I placed them when I was going to use the darker blue color and freehand it. But again, if you did outline it, it would be easier. And don't forget to wipe away your pencil or eraser shaving. And now to add color, I chose to use watercolor paints. I just like using them. I feel like they're very versatile, they mix well. And so if you are using watercolor, you want to have a paintbrush, a cup of water, some paper towels in case you need to dab any excess paint up or dry your brush, and of course your paints. So I am starting with the background, and I am going to build my color on top of that. And you can see that I'm just taking my brush, I'm just dipping it in the water, and essentially I'm outlining around the face where I'm going to want the background color to go. I'm also going over the hair because my hair is blonde, so I am going to add a little bit of yellow to that. I guess this is called wet on wet because I put water on the paper and then I'm doing the wet paint, so it is two forms of wet water on top of each other. So I'm just doing a very light wash of yellow in the background as well as on my hair in the photo. And I'm going to be going over it with blue, the blue that I'm using for the avatar's skin, and that will turn it green because blue and yellow, the two primary colors together, make the secondary color green. And I do want the background ultimately to just be a general green color, and I will go over the vines a little bit more to make them more prominent. You're welcome to make your background more detailed. I wanted to keep it somewhat simple to keep the focus on the portrait of the avatar, but again, it's up to you, whatever you'd like to do. I am trying to be very sparing with the amount of yellow I add, because you can always add more color and build it up, but it is hard to go back and make it lighter. So after I filled that whole area with the light yellow, I am just slightly going over with a little bit more of a golden color that I have in my paint palette for the blonde hair. Again, this is optional and completely depends on what your hair looks like or however you decide to draw your avatar. So use whatever colors you choose to use or have available. Unfortunately, I forgot to press record when I initially colored in the ears on my painting, so I wanted to make sure I included this in the example, so I just drew up another one really quick. So you can see I'm doing the same technique where I'm first mapping out where I want the pink color to go for the inside of the ear with just a plain wet brush. And then just like I did with the yellow in the background, I am going to wet my brush once again, get a little bit of the pink color on my brush, and then just kind of dab it and spread it around the area that I already put the water on. It's okay if it bleeds a little bit into the top part of the ear where we're going to be putting the blue, because if you do look at a reference image again, you can see it is pink and blue, but it does kind of blend a little bit to create some of the purple looking inside their ear and also on the tips of their nose and their lips. So then I let that dry before adding the light blue color, just to give it a chance to settle in to avoid bleeding. And we will go back on the actual portrait and I'll show you how I did that. And now I am going to use my light blue on the face of the avatar, and again I'm going from light to dark. So I'm starting with the light blue, which will be the base color of her skin, and then I'll be adding the darker blue to create the stripes. And I am doing the same technique where I am mapping out where I want the light blue color to go by simply wetting my brush and painting around the top of the face. I did break the face up into half. I did the top half plus the nose, and then I ended up doing the cheeks and the chin, and then the rest of the body. I just did this to make it easier for myself to break it up into sections so you can do the whole thing if you feel confident in doing that. Again, personal preference and whatever is easiest for you. Since I did have a little bit of extra water, I did start pulling the color down to the rest of the face though, and I did slowly build it up just ever so slightly by adding more water and more of the light blue color to my brush. And hopefully you can see that I am overlapping just the tiniest bit around the edges of the lips as well as the nose, because again, like I said before, it does have that little bit of purple on their lips and their nose. And then I'll also do the same for the ears to just get that ever so slight bit of purple color. So I am just doing the same technique on the whole body of the avatar, where I am mapping it out with just water first to try to avoid bleeding and keep the color contained. And then again, just adding a little bit of paint, adding a little bit of water, and slowly building the color to make it the intensity that I would like it to be. And now I'm doing the same thing with a slightly smaller brush on the tips of the ears, because the pink is definitely dried now. Again, wetting my brush, just going over the top parts and the little bottom parts with some water, because that's where I'd like the light blue to go. And then just slightly dabbing it and trying to blend it. Also slightly trying to get that little bit of purple to add to the color, but don't do it too much to smudge it too much. But you can see that the blue is bleeding a little bit, and you can kind of see the purple color is mixing there with the pink and the blue, so I'm happy with how that came out. You can also see that I did add a little bit of just pure water to my brush to try to blend the colors a little bit more, again, to get that purple color. So that is one way, if your paint is dried, to kind of wake it up again with some water so the pink was more mixable. While I let the skin dry, I'm going back in with my light blue, and like I said before, I am just lightly adding water to my brush and going over the whole background. And again, because I am mixing blue and yellow, I'm getting green. You can probably see that I do have 3 different shades of green in my palette, so I do end up going over the vines with those, again, just to add some more depth, but work with whatever colors or materials you have. You could just leave the background like this to really keep the main focus purely on the avatar. Again, personal preference. I did just want to add a little bit of more color variation to the vines. After going over the background with the light blue on the skin had a chance to dry, so now I am going into the dark blue with my thinner brush, and I am going to make the stripes on the face. So again, I was looking at that reference image that I took before I erased the pencil marks to see exactly where I put the stripes. But like I said before, if you did end up outlining them with black Sharpie, you'll have no issue knowing exactly where to put them. So this, I was freehanding it slightly more. Hindsight, I kind of wish that I probably did outline it with black Sharpie, but you know, you experiment and learn from your mistakes. And you can also see that I did get a little bit of the dark blue accidentally on the hair, so I do have a little piece of paper towel that I tore off to try to dab up and soak up some of the color. That is a great way to, if you accidentally get too much water on your brush or something and you want to soak up some of the color for watercolor paints, grab a paper towel or a tissue and just dab it lightly. The quicker the better before it dries. Also, for these stripes, since they are much more pigmented and darker, I am not doing the water wash because I really want this color to be more exact with a harsher or a stronger line. So I am just wetting my brush, going right into my dark blue, and not adding as much. I mean, I am still building a little bit, but not adding nearly as much water as I was before, again, to keep the color really concentrated so I can get a nice crisp line. In the event, if you didn't initially outline the stripes with black Sharpie, once the light blue is dry, you could actually go in and just outline it with Sharpie and then paint within that. Sharpie goes over watercolor as well, very nicely, as well as being painted over with it, so that would be another option. And then I went and added the 2 stripes on either cheek with the same technique by going in with more concentrated dark blue and just trying to follow the lines that I had done before. But again, if you did decide to go in after with Sharpie and outline it, that would be easier as well. I did go in with the darker blue to add some shadows to the top of the lips also, as well as the area under the chin where the lips protrude more, again to just add some more depth, make it look a little bit more 3-dimensional. So I did use more water on my brush here just to be safe so I wouldn't get that harsh line, because these outlines I did want to have more blended. So you could also add some more water and blend the color out a little bit more, as you can see. And then I did want to darken up the rest of the body, so I again added more water to my brush, tried to build the color with the dark blue a little bit here and there until I was happy with it. And that is the main part of it. You could be done at this point. Like I mentioned before, I did go in with my different shades of green and just went over the vines a little bit to make them more prominent. So I varied the color with the light, the medium, and then the dark green. If you don't already have pre-made green in your watercolor palette, you can always go back to basics and add some more yellow and then also add some more blue on top. That will create a more intense green color as well in the vines, so there's always that option also. And after I went over my vines, like I said before, I decided to also add a tree branch, so I took my brown and just went over that as the last color, because remember, we always want to go light to dark with watercolor, and the brown is the darkest color here, so it's the last one that I'm using. And again, I am using less water on my brush because I do want it to be more opaque and to really be exact with the lines. And I always forget to add my signature, but you're welcome to add your signature after the paint is dry if you'd like to, like a professional famous artist does, but again, totally up to you. And after all of my paint was dry, I did go in with my white acrylic pen paint and just added some dots, because if you notice on the reference image, avatars do have those little sparkly bits on their face. Again, totally optional. You could also do this with a paintbrush or even a toothbrush. And you can add any final touches, like possibly darkening up the skin if you feel like it's a little light. But that is my finished avatar.